Welcome to Bloomberg Law. I'm Lee Pacchia. Next week, United States and Chinese officials plan to discuss the possibility of allowing the Securities and Exchange Commission to investigate companies located within China. Joining me now to discuss the potential legal implications is Mitch Nussbaum. Mitch is the chair of the Securities Practice Group at law firm Loeb Loeb. Welcome.
Thank you, Lee.
So this issue has been getting a lot of attention in the press as of late. Companies that are located in China but publicly traded in the United States. All of a sudden we're starting to see a lot of disclosures regarding auditors resigning, accounting irregularities. What's going on here? Is this simply a matter of seeing who's swimming naked once the tide goes out, or is something else at play?
No, there's more at play. Basically, what you've seen is a lot of Chinese companies been requested by investors to upgrade their auditors to the Big Four auditing firms. And what you've seen in the last audit cycle is that some of them have implemented different procedures than they have in years past.
What prompted that?
Well, I think concern mostly around the bank accounts. Mm-hmm. People were concerned that what the auditors were getting they were just basically reviewing statements that were provided by the companies. And what really prompted this was that the SEC, in their investigation, started asking these auditing firms, what are you doing to verify the bank accounts? Are you just receiving bank statements, or are you actually going to the bank itself and getting the statements? And I think the requests from the SEC sort of made these auditing firms change their practices. And in the course of changing their practices, they've discovered irregularities.
Interesting. This whole idea of U.S. regulators investigating companies in China, it seems quite unusual. Is there any precedent for this?
It isn't, and this is new, but this is part of how everything is evolving in this space. This is the cross-border type economy in a global world, and you're dealing with global markets.
Do you see this extending to other emerging markets?
I do. I mean, I think this will be precedent for the emerging markets as they list in the United States. And we have to understand that a lot of these countries, they just don't necessarily automatically operate the way we do in the United States.
Right.
They have their own practices and so forth. And the question is, for the SEC is, how do you protect U.S. investors as they invest in these emerging markets?
Right. It's a fascinating concept because it opens up a whole basket of other questions. First off, how feasible is this for the SEC to go into another country and enforce their decisions?
Well, two things. We have to separate two points here. First of all, what we've just seen in terms of an announcement is the Public Accounting Oversight Board speaking to Chinese government officials about having the ability to investigate accounting books and records in China. There seems to be some progress along those lines. But the second point that will be very interesting will be, now that you get the books and records and you can investigate the information, how will you be able to enforce irregularities? And that will be an interesting topic.
Where do you begin to answer that question? I mean, to me, it's just unfathomable.
It's difficult because typically the SEC has jurisdictional limitations as to where they could go and enforce.
Right.
And this obviously challenges that premise. So we'll see what happens.
It's a huge initiative, and we were talking before, the SEC has an awful lot on its plate just in the domestic sphere already. They need to hire, say, tons of lawyers to just get up to speed on the new mandates coming online with Dodd-Frank in coming months and years. Does the SEC have the horses to take on a task like this?
Well, I'm sure that they'll request, budgetary accommodations to be able to do this, but it's a very important issue. I mean, as I said, as things become more global and as countries from around the world try to access the capital markets and raise capital, which I think you'll see more and more and more of, these issues become very important and they need to be sorted out.
Some would say that this really isn't China's issue to fix. These companies, after all, are reviewed and listed on American exchanges. What's the counter-argument to that?
As to why the Chinese government should enforce. Because the situation is, if you do have someone in China who has committed irregularities, and we can't, or the U.S. government can't bring an enforcement action against this person because they're outside jurisdictional borders, well then someone's got to do it. And I think that the investor base is going to say, well, listen, if this guy altered the financial statements or altered his bank statements, and we have financial statements that have been, quote unquote, cooked, he ought to face, criminal sanctions for doing that. And I think the global investor base is going to put pressure increasing amount of pressure to make sure that anybody who breaks the law, pays the price for it.
Now, to grant the SEC the type of access that they want in this situation, China has to make some changes to its laws. Is that correct?
Well, right now, what they're talking about is cooperating with Public Accounting Oversight Board investigators. As I said, the next question will be, what do we do about enforcement?
There has a little bit of confusion emanating as to whether this is an issue that revolves around certain business practices like reverse mergers, or if this is a problem with the way China does business.
I think this has been, I think this has been misconstrued in the media a bit. The reverse mergers have been beat up a bit by the media and by short sellers because there's a perception that they're not regulated as much as traditional initial public offerings. But if you look at most of the ones that have been subject to controversy, they've gone through full SEC reviews. They've gone through underwritten public offerings where underwriters and their counsels and auditors have done all the appropriate due diligence on them as they would an initial public offering. The real story here has to do with the integrity of the financial statements coming from China. That's the story, and actually that's what the SEC and the Public Accounting Oversight Board is concerned about. The SEC did put out a bulletin with regard to reverse mergers, but they also said that they may come up with additional rules in terms of how to better regulate that area.
Do you see this initiative resulting in new regulations on the United States side of the equation?
I think there will be with regard to reverse mergers, and there may be with regard to foreign companies in general. It's hard to just isolate on China. So I think that there might be with regard to foreign companies that list in the United States in general.
This is fascinating stuff. When you take a step back and look at what the SEC is doing here, how would you grade them? Are they going about this the right way? Is there something they could be doing better?
It's a very complex topic. There are things that I think could have been done better. First of all, the short seller attacks on these Chinese companies have been, in some cases, have been correct, but for the most part, are irresponsible. So you have short sellers who go ahead, put a short position on the company, and throw all sorts of allegations against the company without actually visiting them, without actually spending the time over there to see what they're writing is true or not. And it seems to me that the SEC, it would be nice if the SEC would hold them under the same standards as they do the issuers.
Do you think there's any likelihood that that could happen?
Probably not right now. I think the SEC has always given the short sellers, whether it's in China or in the U.S., some degree of slack because they happen to ferret out some fraud, which the SEC wouldn't be able to do in and of itself. But it would be nice if they would be held to the same standards as the company in terms of being responsible and obligated to issue true and correct information, just like a company would. I think a lot of the confusion that's going on out there is because people read these reports by the short sellers, which completely slam these companies, and you've got the companies denying everything, and they're reading both sides, and they're saying,
it's impossible to verify.
How do I know what anybody's telling me is true?
It's a huge problem.
It's a huge problem.
All right, Mitch Nussbaum. We're going to have to leave it there for now, but I want to thank you for coming in.
Okay, thank you.
That's Mitch Nussbaum. He is a partner at the law firm Loeb Loeb, based here in New York City. If you'd like to learn more about the issues we just discussed, go check our offerings on BloombergLaw.com and also on the Bloomberg Terminal. I'm Pacchia. Thanks for watching.